All right, I'm gonna make sure that you are pinned. Everyone, if you're joining, welcome to our February Fireside Chat. This is Rachael Nemeth, the CEO of Opus Training. I'm here with a new and dear friend, an Opus partner, and fellow founder, Matt Nelson with Modern Training. We're going to be talking about content development strategies in a minute here, and specifically kind of leaning into what are some of the challenges that we see specifically in the hospitality industry around content development, and what are some ways to solve for some of those problems. So I'm going to, here we go. I'm going to pin us so we're side by side as a true fireside chat here. Matt, so excited that we're here in this room together.
It's the best day of my life.
Well, maybe we can kick it off if you want to talk a little bit about you and Modern Training, and then we can get moving. For anyone who's watching, we're on LinkedIn Live, which means you're welcome to toss questions into the chat, where we can make sure to answer them along the way. If we don't get to your question, we're happy to toss it into the comments on LinkedIn so that you can get those answers later on. So Matt, take it away.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Matt Nelson, founder, CEO of Modern Training and Development Incorporated, longest company name I could think of. We're heading towards our 10th year of developing learning content and providing support to L&D teams, mostly in the restaurant industry, and then off into retail and other industries as well as our team has grown. So I think the ability to provide, best-in-class content and support, partnered with Opus, which is a best-in-class platform, is a chance for us to deliver a really cool, complete solution. And I'm super excited to be here with my friend Rachael.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important thing for us to be talking about. At Opus, we're in the technology space. We're not in the content space, which is how you and I met, Matt. And you're solving a problem that we decided we didn't want to pursue, and you're solving a problem that you decided you didn't want to pursue, which makes it kind of a match made in heaven. But it's so rare to find really, really skilled content designers and instructional designers. But I know that just from my own experience, that finding folks with your level of expertise, it's not a matter of getting a degree at a university. There's a lot of other experiences behind the work that you've done and the team that you've built. So I'm curious to hear more about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I grew up in kitchens. I'm a restaurant person, for all the good and the bad that means. But for the good, I think restaurant people are people of service, and that's why I started the company. Was I thought, okay, I was a dishwasher, and I loved cleaning dishes. I loved it. In fact, I wish I could do that for just one day and have my problems just be dirty dishes. But and then I cooked, and I loved cooking for people. I managed, and I loved developing people. I became a trainer. I started this company because I felt, hey, can't we solve problems for more people? And I don't feel like people should be left on their own to solve some of the same problems from brand to brand to brand. So really, I'm self-taught in terms of L&D, but I had great mentors and great teachers. The last time that I worked for a company was over 10 years ago, so there still wasn't a lot of e-learning around. In fact, when I started the company, most of our projects were still 200-page binders. We don't get as many requests for that anymore. But I think the last 10 years, it's been cool to see how content delivery has changed, but a lot of other changes that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But it is hard to find the right people. We have to try very hard to find the very best. And these are people who can be more efficient and quicker and bring a lot of hours clocked in instructional design. I think that helps a lot, but also can push back and be very creative at the same time. it's a cool mix. Hey, before we get too much into it though, in the honor of the Fireside Chat, I want to share this content that I made. So I made this in under 5 minutes. So you really can make quick content. I'm just going to put this up here for everybody to enjoy. There's our Fireside Chat.
Man, that is skill to the nth degree. I'm floored. I knew you had a surprise.
Only the best.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We really are working with the creme de la creme. So
obviously.
Well, maybe we can start from the beginning here. You know, a lot of the conversations we have with customers at Opus, specifically folks that are in the hospitality industry, but also in construction and manufacturing and warehousing, is, hey, I'm really interested in a learning platform. I have nothing. I literally have nothing. So when we talk about content, I love just a high level definition of what exactly is content and what exactly is content development. And I only say that because often my response, and feel free to push back, is you actually have content, but you have an opportunity to kind of leverage it better. So you have manuals and videos and things like that. But a lot of people don't see that as training sometimes. So I just love to hear your thoughts on, you know, what is content and what is content development?
I mean, content is just any way that you can share information to try to get people to do things the way you want them to do them. You know, honestly, I mean, that's what training is, right? Is there's a vision for, if we only had one location and the founder was in there every single day running the place, how do you take that magic, the culture, the consistency, the execution, and how do you scale that, right? I think that's where training comes into play, and where all this content development comes into play. Content development, to me and my team, is definitely the time that it takes to share information with groups of people, with your team members. At a microscopic level, content development is deciding what the height and width of a text box will be, or whether or not buttons should have shadows, or whether or not to capitalize guests every time instead of saying the word customers. So it's like, it's all these little details, but it's also the big picture of, we don't want to just push information forward like we did for decades. We want to engage people and have a conversation. We want them to be able to think. We want more behavioral skills instead of technical skills. So it can't just be a one-way street anymore. So content development is gone beyond how do we take our job aids and manuals and digitize them. It's also, okay, it's more than that. We gotta find a way to make this a conversation and get a feedback loop and all those things that are involved in content development now, which can make it all feel pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, and you know, when we will oftentimes, and especially in our partnership, we'll kind of see customers who have 100-page manuals and really beefy packets that they've been using. Do you feel like a lot of the feeling of being overwhelmed and intimidated by kind of transforming that content is really driven by not knowing where to start? Like, what is the base of that fear when we do discover that restaurants have a lot of this existing? What's kind of preventing them from leveraging that and kind of modernizing it?
A lot of different answers. Platform is one of the first ones that sticks out. I think people don't know if they have the right, or if they have it all, the right platform, the right way to distribute this information in a way that's accessible, right, to the people when they want it, when they need it, as a single source of truth. I think that's the big challenge, right? So we have some PDFs, we have some Word documents, we have a PowerPoint from 1997. We don't want to share that though. You know, do we use Google Drive? Do we use SharePoint? There's all these ways that you can get to a result, but I don't know that there's a standout best way, right? So that's what everyone's trying to figure out, is how am I gonna, you know, what software should I use to develop this information, and then how am I gonna distribute it? That's the big challenge. But I think we're probably moving towards some standouts in terms of methods of delivering content, of creating content, and platforms to distribute it to get us out of the sea of sameness that we've had for maybe the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, that I'd love to dig in, because I know we have a lot of people listening and really looking for some tactical advice on what they can do. I'm thinking about that training manager or training director in a sea of 1,300 employees who's been tasked with, hey, take this, locked PDF and make it into a training that is consistent across all 11 locations or 20 locations. You were talking about finding a learning platform. I'd love to talk about that later. But really, when we just talk about kind of like auditing your existing materials and really finding where the gaps are and developing new materials, even if they're paper, what is the secret to doing that quickly? Or is it even possible?
Of course it's possible. Anything is possible. I'm an optimist. Quick in a day, probably not. Here's what I think. You gotta go back to the very beginning, and you have to tie in training needs assessment to operations. And I think we've probably seen, I think we've talked about it. It seems like L&D is maybe trending towards reporting towards operations instead of HR. I don't talk to very many VPs of HR anymore, for example. The reason I think that it's heading towards operations is because if you're going to start doing an assessment of where's our training at, or what do we need, we're getting ready to scale, we have 20 units now, it's time to grow up in a big way, what do we need to do? You first find out, what do you want each team member to do during their steps? What are the skills that they really need? And you got to start there, because probably your library of information has been stacked up over time, again, in Word and PowerPoint and Excel and whatever, and kind of built like a Frankenstein, and so it needs to be drawn back down to the studs and say, we got to align this with our skills. And maybe the skills that were important 2 years ago maybe aren't as important now. We did a poll on LinkedIn a few months ago. What do you think your team members need the most training on this year? And I snuck in among, compliance training and skills training, I snuck in people skills on a guess, and it was over 50%. I don't think we would have gotten the same answer 2 years ago, right? So it's okay to refresh that look at, what do we want to train? I asked, actually the first year or two that we were going, I was in a room with all the leadership of this concept, and they were talking about, hey, we need you to make an MIT program. I said, great. What do you want managers to do during their shift? And it was just dead silence. Because I don't think we're going back to the beginning enough and thinking, okay, do I want them just doing whatever's in front of their faces? Or do we want to take a different approach to this and say, we want you to be a people first manager and always on the floor. And so we need to teach you and give you the tools that you need to be able to do that.
So you bring up something very interesting. There are many different theories around content development, and they largely stem from the who, right? Who should get the training first, second, third? And of course, what we hear a lot in the industry is, managers are my most important asset. They're the ones who are training our frontline team. So there's kind of a few buckets that we see when it comes to content needs and use cases. The first is the leadership training. The second is train the trainer. And then the third is the frontline training. Have you noticed any changes in the past decade around what those priorities are? So that's part one. And part two is, what is the best first step that a company could take? Is it true that starting with manager training is the best, or MIT training, manager in training, is the best way to start?
Wow, great question. So I don't think priorities have changed much. I think what we hear when we're looking at those three buckets of hourly team members, certified trainers, and management training, the first thing we say is, what about everything in between, right? Because it should be a continuous journey and not necessarily this segmented every 2 or 3 years you get a promotion kind of thing. but often we hear, hey, we should start with hourly training, right? Because you need an hourly training program before you can teach managers how to do their jobs. Look, if you have an hourly training program, but you don't have a manager program, and you're, say, partnering with us and say, hey, we need to start with hourly training and redo it. If you have something that's working now, focus on the thing that is the biggest gap that you have nothing put together for. So with management training, for example, target soft skills first and get started with that. There's great resources out there. There's a ton of off-the-shelf content on management training out there. We spend most of our time creating custom training, but we have off-the-shelf soft skills training for managers too, because why start from zero when we're talking about, best practices for interviewing or what PARs are and that kind of stuff. You don't need to start from scratch with all those. There's some resources out there that might give you a head start. But I don't think priorities have changed in terms of hourly certified and manager. A couple of responses would be, get the managers out of the way of the hourly team member training and go right to the hourly team members. Our GMs are busy and they can veto training. And it doesn't matter how much time and money you invest into a great training program and all this work that we're talking about, a content development, if the managers feel like they're too busy to execute it. But with the right platform and the right methodology of how you're delivering content and empowering team members to move through skill training at their own pace without having to raise their hand and ask for permission, I think that's a great move there.
You brought up something just now that I want to touch upon, and then I think we should talk about methodology, specifically around content development, because there's many different approaches that we hear. And I know a lot of people want to get your perspective on this. Off the shelf versus branded content. What's out there today? And what's your opinion on the off the shelf content that exists? Examples of off the shelf might be something compliance related, like sexual harassment prevention, industry related, like alcohol safety or customer recovery, or things, workplace safety, allergen training. How much of training actually does come down to what's off the shelf, and how much of it really needs to be branded to a company and specific to their standard operating procedures?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're out there listening and you think you're bad because you use off-the-shelf content, you're not bad. There's nothing to feel guilty about. The world is your oyster with off-the-shelf content, right? What I would say, and of course I'm biased, I think your off-the-shelf training should only be used if it's specific to your workplace. So one of the most common requests that we get is, hey, we were under contract, which is crazy to me, with HR content company, and we have to pay them exorbitant fees annually to use their harassment training, and it's stock images of people in suits. It's so gross to me. Like, what is the point of harassment training? To check a box or to change behaviors, right? So if you want your brand to be a place where the rate of reported sexual harassment and sexual assaults is way below the industry 75%, and you want to create a great place to work, the more precise and specific your content is to you, the better, right? So you got to start somewhere, but I really do feel like, if you're a restaurant company, use restaurant-specific compliance training. That really makes sense and is applicable so that people can apply this knowledge to their shifts.
Right, and that links to this larger conversation around methodology, which is, this isn't just, we feel really strongly about this at Opus, which is this training is solving a core problem at organizations. If you've solved for training, you've solved for so many other pieces. Communication, you've solved for scheduling, like all of these things. But when it comes to that, it's so easy to kind of get wrapped up in an approach that says all we need for people to do is just check the box. I just need for you to get through this new hire training and say that you did it. I just need for you to complete, this sexual harassment prevention and say that you did it. But it's largely coming from like a platform that's not accessible to team members, so people sort of begrudgingly do it, or content that's not built for them, that doesn't feel personal and doesn't feel one size fits one. And I would argue that's not a debate. It's kind of like that's the core problem, right? But the question is, then what's the best approach for solving that problem? So I'm curious to hear, when you talk to people about modern training and you talk about your approach, how do you describe that to them as far as how you approach content development?
Well, we have a process that we have refined and will continue to refine for as long as we're in business. We want to get better all the time. And what we're trying to do is, one is we don't sacrifice the quality of the content that we want to create for you. So if you're looking for something that doesn't feel like it's effective or specific to your brand, you would be coming to the wrong place for us. So, okay, so we know it has to be premium. So what's the next objective? It's usually how fast can we get it done? We can get hourly training, certified training, and management training programs done in 4 months if we have to, 6 months, 12 months, depending on how urgent it is and what the priorities are. I think that's a big ask for an internal L&D team or team of one, to get that much done. And honestly, then by the time you get it done, part of it's outdated. So what do you do there? So I think, again, it really does start with, look, either get some outside help, or, if you're at least getting started internally, the best thing you can do to move quickly, document everything and all your procedures, talk to your, COO, whoever it is, and say, what are the intended business outcomes? What can we help support through training? I know you want a sales increase of 4% this year. What specific skills would help our cashiers, increase our sales? Document it, and then you can pivot from there about what platform are you going to use? How are we going to deliver it? But you need that single source of truth, right? First. And so that's not going to change. The way that you deliver the content will change. The need for having accurate and streamlined, I would say, content and documentation is important. Yesterday's binder is today's storyline course and is tomorrow's VR orientation class for team members. So what we consistently find is that the brands, and I'm talking about whether they have 5 units and they're just a small city chain, all the way to international brands, no one that we've ever partnered with has had everything documented. So that's the place to start.
Well, now it brings me to a conversation I know that everyone has had, probably with you, but something that you're thinking about as an operator, which is, does it make financial sense for me to outsource content development? And it's a question we hear a lot at Opus, since we're not developing content and we have a content authoring tool. It's this question of, should I be using my own team to build, or should I be using an outsourced team to build in Opus? And our response is always, whatever feels good to you.
Yeah.
You can build internally and collaboratively on Opus if you'd like to. If you're feeling like you want to bring in professional instructional designers, we know great people. But there are those horror stories about bringing in the contracted contracted instructional designer. It's like a $90,000, $100,000 a year person. They're spending 6 months getting up to speed on the operation, developing a whole strategy, which is fine and good. And then kind of 6 months building, hopefully. What are you doing differently at Modern Training? Because I certainly know that that's the reason why we wanted to partner with you, was that you don't fit that model necessarily of you kind of already have all of these pillars filled. You're industry professionals, you have the team to rapid fire build content, you're technology savvy, but you also respect the needs of what your customers actually need. I might have just answered this for you, but like,
yeah, keep going.
but I guess that's my point, right? You and I were talking about this the other day. It's what's the benefit of outsourcing versus hiring from within?
Yeah, there's some great L&D teams and people out there who are doing great work. And one of my favorite things to do is to partner with those people who are already doing great work, but just need some additional resources. So I don't think there's anything wrong with partnering with, a company like ours that's saying, we're not just producing a product for you that we're going to deliver in 6 months. We're an extension of your training team. That's how we treat the partnership. The reason that we can get things done at a high level much more quickly, one, we're probably not in as many meetings as you are, not you, but you. And then we just have really great, experience and systems that we use. We are meticulous about project management. The people on my team responsible for the different parts of the process enjoy that part. Like you enjoy a platform, and I'm never going to start a tech platform company. It's not going to happen. But you're great at it. So we have the right people in the right places. We are very good at intake. We'll have a brand send us for last month 284 documents, and through Weave Transfer, and said, okay, create a scope of work. So within a few days, we'll catalog everything. We know exactly what's in all those documents. They could be job aids, they could be e-learning courses, they could be anything. And we catalog it, understand what's here, what do we think is probably missing. We might mark some things that we think are likely outdated. If there's gaps in knowledge, procedural knowledge with our restaurant experience, maybe we can fill in the gaps pretty quickly there with that missing information. But we're able to get from intake of current documentation to a project plan in a week or less. And once we have a partnership started, we're usually storyboarding courses within 30 days, and actually developing content within 60 days. Pretty average. I mean, sometimes it's 5 days, right? Depending on the ask. That happens a lot too last week. But usually 30 days to start, going through everything and get storyboard started. And then within 60 days, we're building courses. And then we have a great process and great tools, that we use to save a little bit of time in each part of the process. And I think that's what helps. So if you survived the last couple of years and you're getting ready to grow, and your openings are starting in May or June, and there's no way for you to get what you need to start opening 1, 5, 10, 100 locations a year, then yeah, I think it's probably a good time to partner with an expert and say, we promise that we're going to deliver great stuff by June 1st.
Yeah. And having those like very clear milestones in place of people who have the team to deliver it. It does bring me to the kind of $1 million question, which is, you have seen every learning management system out there, Matt, probably some I've never heard of. And I know you're used to working within many of them. I'm curious to hear, like, what are you looking for in a great delivery system? So when you think about the content that you've built, how does that relate to the learning platform that you're working on?
Yeah, great. So when we create content, what we're really doing is creating an experience. So it doesn't matter what kind of platform that we're using. And I haven't seen them all because there's like 10,000 and counting, but I have definitely seen some of the ones that are kind of garbage. And I've seen a lot of the ones that are kind of the top, the top 6 that everybody in restaurants uses. A lot of them, I said sea of sameness. I kind of mean that in a bad way, but also it means that you have choices, to make a decision, and that they're all the classic LMS companies are have the features that you probably need the most. So what do we look for? Because we offer support for vendor selection. Is want to know what your vision is for your training experiences. That's number one. I want it to be easy enough to, on the back end, on the admin side, I want it to be clear, and I want to make sure that the reporting features are there. And especially I want to work with an LMS that understands the restaurant industry and all the multiple vertical and horizontal hierarchies of corporate and franchise and regional managers and DMs and assistant managers and servers and all the things. I want to make sure that we can deliver the right content to the right people. Super important. The other thing that I look for then on the more important side, which is the learner experience side, how long does it take to get to the content? How many clicks? I think there's a lot of cool features that are promoted on websites for platforms out there. But I think that everyone in the platform industry, in the tech industry, needs to be hyper-focused on the learner experience. We can all agree that we can't lose a single employee, and we're losing more than we ever have. So what can we do to slow that down or stop it? I think that the details matter. So I think being hyper-focused on the learner experience, on the details, we need fewer, big modules. We have a messaging platform, we have a scoring platform, whatever.
Right.
I think it's less about the big modules moving forward. And I think it needs to be like, how many inputs does it take from the team member before they can start learning? We want them to keep going. And I talk about Duolingo a lot, the language learning app. I've been learning Spanish for 8 years. So I'm not as committed as I could be. Coming up on my 9th year, but I'm actually getting there now. Like I'm about ready to hit past tense, so that's going to be a big step for me. But what I love about it is it's continued. I always know that I can pick up my phone and within seconds I can start learning Spanish. There aren't many platforms that deliver an experience like that for restaurant team members. So I think we need to think about how many inputs does it take? What is the amount of time in seconds that it takes someone to start a lesson, jump to the next lesson? Is the learning path continuous, and is it absolutely clear? What do I do next? Can I unlock content, and unlock skill packages and level up? And do I have to ask permission to do that, or can I just do it? Do I need to ask if I can be a bartender, or can I learn the skills that it takes to be a bartender, and perhaps then I'll be the next in line? So I want platforms to do fewer things, but in a much better way.
Yeah. And do you feel like, I think this is a good transition into like the different methodologies of platforms, and some of like the old ways and some of the new ways that people are thinking about content development. So there are platforms that like heavily leverage videos. There are other platforms that are really lean into SCORM and that model. There are other platforms that are an intranet where they kind of leave employees to it and say, hey, go select this course and take this quiz and you're good to go. There are platforms that are more interactive. And then you have like the gamified type approach. Is this the type of thing that, like, when we talk about content development, if like, Roger, the training manager, is sitting here overwhelmed, thinking about like, I need to create this whole training program for my company right now. At what point is he also considering that methodology, and what the best approach is for his team?
When we take on new projects, it's not at the beginning of the project that I determine what the methodology is. I don't think that matters as much as that all important step that I've already talked about, which is, do we have the right information, and is it aligned with what you want your team members to execute? So once we have that, then, it might be an e-learning course, in SCORM or Tin Can. It could be a video. It could be chat-based. There's options for that. I think there's probably some best practices if we're talking culture, or we're showing hospitality and how to engage with guests. I like video for a lot of that. But and I'd be a fool if I said don't use video, because people love video. But you don't want to pick something that's the only thing you go with. We create, hundreds of storyline courses a year, but I would never tell a client, hey, you should only do storyline courses. What other ways can you engage people? The whole point is we want them to engage and interact and want to keep learning. That's the goal. So in terms of when do you look at methodology? Later, make sure that the platform can handle video, and maybe if video is important, can it do it well? Is it offline synced? Does it download to the device so you don't have bandwidth issues? I mean, there's some things to think about there. But as long as you know that the platform can handle what you think you're going to do, I think deciding how to deliver content is much later in the process than people think.
So you've brought up video. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on user-generated content and how are you seeing, because we're seeing a lot of this, businesses are really interested in sourcing content, whether it's video, usually videos, sometimes images, from their front line. If you have 20 locations and they're all making pizzas every day, why wouldn't you want to leverage the line cooks out there and have them kind of submit how they make their best pie? We see this all the time. So that's just one example of ways that people can kind of speed up the content development. I think there's like a lot of misconceptions that you always need like a high production video when sometimes just the TikTok length selfie video of somebody explaining, how to like polish the counters is actually the most meaningful way to engage your front line. Are you seeing companies like picking up on that trend? Is it
Not
something
fast
that
enough.
they can brief? Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. It's like, it's such an obvious, easy solution, but what's preventing us from like seeing more of that happening?
Yeah, fear, I guess, fear, I'll say the word empowerment over and over again. People need to get over this fear of personal devices in the workplace. They need to get over the fear of user-generated content. That doesn't mean that you're opening up a portal that anybody can submit a meme to that would offend every single other team member in that company without being, vetted and curated. That's not what I'm saying. Make sure that the platform supports the distribution of that content in an intelligent, safe way, but absolutely get user-generated content. I was cook and the kitchen manager for 13 years. Every place I worked, there was always that one cook, sometimes me, who said, I make the best salad here. I make the best pizza here. Who would, plate dishes a little bit, more carefully and more artistically than everybody else, right? So capture that. I mean, those are your heroes at each location. Get those heroes involved. Keep them working for you. Keep them on a career path and becoming supervisors and managers and trainers. Make them famous in your brand, and I promise they will strut at work, and that's a good thing. So all about user-generated content. Make it easy for them to submit anything, and then whatever you need to do to filter that, do it. But if they're happy creating content for you, that means they're engaged with your brand. That's a positive thing. Don't shut it out. Bring it in. Let the light in, right? And with devices, look, these are the devices that people are comfortable using. So why would you not optimize that? I think we're past the days where a guest would see a server or a cashier look at their phone and go, I'm disgusted by the service here. First of all, we're past that. Second of all, there's more good that you're missing out on by not delivering content to someone's personal device than you are by having them check, scroll through Instagram Reels for 30 seconds in between orders.
Yeah. You have to think about what the trade-off is. Do you want to have a system where your team is, kind of shuttered from access to their training, or do you want to meet them where they are? But it does mean that they might have their phone in their back pocket sometimes to do their training.
Totally okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, we see it more and more, of course, which is why we're bullish on mobile-based training. I do want to wrap up here, though, with two questions. The first is, what advice would you give to a new training manager who's kind of like fresh into this role today, on how they can really be successful in that position?
So I would learn from others. I would answer that in two ways: learn from others and practice. Every time I think I have a great design or layout or a great course that I've developed or something wonderful that I create, within seconds or months or years, I hate it, right? So we're always getting better. So I would just say, get it out there and don't be afraid to create and keep evolving your creativity. And one of the ways that you can do that is to learn from others. There's so many resources that are available now that weren't available when I was working in a corporate training department. There were no books, there were no podcasts, blogs, conferences. They wouldn't pay for me to go to chart. So, I mean, there's great resources out there that are available. And I would just say, don't be shy, learn from others. And by the way, anybody can contact me anytime. I'll talk about training all day. So there's good resources out there. Let's make connections.
Second question is where do you see content development going in the next 10 years? What's going to change, whether it's the platforms that you're using to develop on, or whether it's, what we're seeing specifically in restaurants? Just curious to hear what's ahead in your brain.
I think the change is already happening. I'm excited and scared and all the other emotions. So, I think what we've been doing for 10 or 15 years is trying to create the best versions of what everybody else has. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the best spiral binder for your MIT program, the best storyline course that has the most coolest interactions in it. I think that's what we've been doing, the coolest videos. I think that's going to transition a little bit. For one thing, and I hope this is promising and I hope it's true, I think we're going to see bigger budgets for L&D. I think the idea that it's okay to not spend money on training, but to invest money in training, and that you're going to get a great return out of it in turnover alone. I think we'll see bigger budgets over the next 10 years. I think one thing I'm curious, that's just an idea of mine that I hope is true, and I'm trying to will it into existence, is I hope that L&D teams become less centralized. If you have 23 people all in neighboring cubicles, I want to get those people out and seeing the world and seeing team members and seeing mistakes, seeing opportunities to improve operations, seeing what's getting used in training and not. One of the things that breaks my heart is we think we do great work in developing training experiences, but then we don't really ever often get to hear, how's it going? Did it make a difference? Do people love it? Do they hate it? Are they indifferent? Which is the worst, right? So I want L&D teams to be less centralized. We're used to remote work now. There's no reason why we can't be out there in the world and working in a restaurant or retail store or whatever and saying, this is what I saw today and we should definitely do this. At the end of the day, though, I think what I'm hoping to see over the next few years is that people are paying attention to their brand standards and the mission, and that's not just talk, and they're going, this is the brand we work for, this is why people love us. And so everything we're going to do with training is to help get that emotional connection that our customers love with us and to move it forward. And the branding that you use to connect with your customers to be the same fun experience that you use to connect with your team members.
I love that.
Oh, and I'm so sorry. Last thing is, I think we're going to see more tech. How could we not? I think we're going to see more creative tech. I think we're going to get out of that sea of sameness, and we're going to see some disruptors. I happen to know one. And hopefully we can fuse all of that change into something that informs team members and entertains them better than we've ever done before.
I love how optimistic you are. I share those feelings, and really excited about what's ahead. Matt, thank you so much for sharing your perspective today. If anyone is interested, modern training, Matt Nelson and his team are exceptional, and it's been just a pure joy working with you. So I'm glad we got a chance to get a few insights and tips from you in this particular chat. If you're interested, follow Modern Training on what platforms?
LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah, we're here today.
I'm positive we're on Facebook and Twitter, but not TikTok.
Also, for all of those trainers out there who are in the restaurant industry, you can catch Matt as well as myself at the Chart Conference, the Council for Hospitality and Restaurant Trainers out in Vegas, March 6th through the 8th. So if you are a trainer, if you are in the restaurant and hospitality industry, that is the conference you have to go to. It's like the must go-to event of the year. So we hope to see you there.
And you could go for free.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we have
the Opus giveaway.
We do. Thank you for the plug. So if you are a restaurant trainer, you can enter to win a free registration to the conference and a free 1-year membership to Chart. That's how much we are obsessed with and love Chart. It's a $1,500 value, completely free. It's a drawing. Follow us on LinkedIn and you can get access to that drawing. And we pick the lucky winner on February the 21st. So make sure you put your name in or nominate someone else. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, thanks for joining me today. This is the best day of my life. I know I say that all the time, but it truly was today. And to everyone out there, look, stay positive. We're serving people and it has an impact. And I'm sure you're all doing great things and will continue to do so.
Great. Thanks, Matt, so much.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Bye, Rachel.